Could you hear that? Did it work, or was it just?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that was our street. So that was hang on.
I think so.
So yeah, so I live in Bristol in the UK, and all over the UK, we're every Thursday night at 8 o'clock. There's a big round of applause for the NHS, the medical services, all the key workers, everyone who's out there, and it spirals into different things. It starts as a big round of applause that everybody does. Often people bring out musical instruments, they bang pots and pans. That's a big British tradition for certain things like this. Lots of banging gates and hitting things and stuff and chanting. And in different places, that's kind of spiraled into sort of more performance type things. There's a chance when most people on the street are all out on the street all together, kind of. So it's like it's a unifying kind of moment, and it lasts 5 minutes every week. It's kind of beautiful. Yeah, it's very beautiful, and it happens all over the UK. Yeah.
So it's every Thursday.
Every Thursday at 8 o'clock. Yeah. And then it just finishes. Everybody goes back in. Good evening. See you later. So, it's fun. Yeah.
So that is a nice kind of moment to come together, but then also to like really make it yours. Like the idea that you can express like celebration and make noise and honor these folks in different ways, and then just kind of like check in with each other, and then go back in. Yeah,
that's it. And it's also changed because it became something that was about celebrating the NHS, and then however the NHS is obviously horribly underfunded, so it's now becoming a bit more actually sort of chanting and things like that, actually like support the NHS, make things better, because I think it started to get where a lot of the NHS a lot of key workers started to feel that's great, you're clapping for us, but we need some real support here, we need help, we're endangered, we don't have enough PPE, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's kind of shifting as these things do, but yeah, the unification part of it, the people just seeing each other on the street, that's also really lovely. Yeah, it's a nice moment in the street.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about kind of what you do, and I love that you brought the idea of play even into that moment. But I'm just gonna take a minute to do a couple of housekeeping things. So for those of you who are here, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Hey, that depending, he's above from my screen, he might be next to you. This is Malcolm Hamilton, who is the co-founder and creative director for Mufti Games, and we will talk about that. I'm Jonell Logan. I am the executive director for the League of Creative Interventionists, which is a US-based organization that supports artists and creatives who are partnering with communities to address kind of social needs, to highlight and elevate questions and concerns that the community has, and really think about how can we together like solve some of these challenges? How do we share them with our cities to make our cities better? And so it's really exciting to have, to be in conversation with Malcolm, because one, you are not in the States, you're in the UK. And two, this whole idea, one of the things that's really important to us is when we think about like changing cities creatively, people often think of placemaking, which in some ways we fall into. But it's important to highlight other ways of doing it, and that there isn't a single definition of placemaking, and it doesn't apply, the same solution doesn't apply to every city. So those are some of the important things that I'm really excited to like have a conversation about, but then whatever else comes up, because this is about play, right? And one other thing, if you have questions, so I have a dual screen up, I will be looking in the comments. You can type your questions there, and then I'll share them with Malcolm so that he can answer them, and we can have a conversation about them. So with that said, Malcolm, why don't you tell us about you?
Okay, so where do I begin? So my name's Malcolm. I live in Bristol, I'm 42, and so I was an actor originally. Well, I was a child, and then I was an actor. Went to drama school, started acting. Moved down to Bristol in 2006, which is in the southwest of England. I was in Scotland before that, actually, for a lot of my life. And down here, it's much more kind of about the making. It's much more about people getting together and just doing stuff. That's the real vibe in Bristol. People just kind of make things happen. And so I came across the term theatre making, and theatre making not being about building sets particularly, but about creating theatre, just about making and creating theatre and just doing it yourself. And so when I came here, there was much more support. There was free spaces to rehearse. There was organizations that would help. And I just started to meet people and just devising and creating and making theatre. A lot of that it was all indoors, really. You know, it was all indoor theatre. And you just kind of got into a lot of conversations, which were, how do we get different audiences into these buildings? Why do only some audiences come into these buildings? How do we get more diverse audiences, different classes, different genders, different classes, different orientations, just more diverse in general. And that's kind of been going on, you know, for years and years and years. And then there was a little commission, which was we're given £50 and 2 hours and a shop window, and what would you do? So we made a life-size game of Hangman, which is the pencil and paper spelling game. And it went really well. People just kind of got it. It's been quite recently thinking about a lot, actually, because it was like touchscreen. It was just people came up to the window and pointed at the letter, and then we just kind of created this game out of it. And then we turned that into a proper show, and we took it out on the street, and it says Hangman, and there was a gibbet, and there's a game show host, and basically there's an actor hidden behind the gibbet, and their head appears with the first wrong answer, and then little body parts attach on one by one. And it's a kind of game about sabotage. And we took it out on the street, other things, and we took it out on the street, and it said Hangman, and people knew what it was. And all of a sudden, you've just got 100 people just coming up, of all kinds of different everything, just coming up and going, oh, I know what this is. I know what Hangman is. I'm going to play this. And suddenly they're involved in interactive art, and they're involved in interactive theatre right there on the street. There's no barricade of the building. There's no barricade of it being art. The invitation was clear. They knew how to play. They knew the game, and they were there. So that became a very, very exciting moment around being able to use a known game that people knew how to play, and they could get involved. And it was all, and it was much more than about the game. I mean, that game is about solving the letters, right, and solving a word, but it's not really about that in our version. That's what happens the first time. Then you realize nothing really happens. It's actually about playing the game. It's that I'm reading the Well Played But Game at the moment again, which is a famous book by Bernard de Koven, who started the New Games Movement, was one of the New Games Movement guys. And it's all about that well played game, like the audience together play this game where they go, on the one hand, we can get the word right. On the other hand, we can make this little strange guy pop his head out, and he'll be there with like one leg and one head dangling, and he's going to get really annoyed, and we can poke fun at him, and we can really annoy the host. And there's a whole load of different things that can happen at the same time. So it becomes about expanding and changing and twisting the rules and all playing together as a community, which is lovely. Anyway, that's the beginning. And then we started to do more and more. We then made battleships. We made massive battleships that you play across rivers or across lakes or across cities. And it's all visual.
Wait,
so
how did you play across lakes?
with binoculars and
really?
flashcards. Yeah. So it's so you've got one board. You've got one board here and one board here, and maybe 100 meters between. And you know, the board's like 2 or 3 meters square. And then the team chooses, and then they go A3, and the other team are looking over, and they go A3. Okay, and then they check their board. And then they come back and they go hit or miss. And that's the way the whole game works. So it's completely visual. So it's all made. Yeah, it's complete. There's no. I mean, there is a bit of speaking in it, but you can play the whole game without seeing each other at all.
Wow.
So it becomes about playing together in these groups again over distance. Yeah. We're going to make a version, actually, a lockdown version, in the next week or two. Because it's a lovely thing to play with your neighbor across the street, right? If you can see them, you can see their window. So we're just going to make a little how-to, but you just got yours and they've got theirs. And then you can see them. You can just put your little things on the window, like A6, whatever, and they can read it, and they can just go hit and miss. And you can just then play those games back and forth over distance, and you're connected without being connected. So yeah.
Wow.
So
So
that
can
was the
you
beginning, but yeah, go on.
so that's the beginning.
Mm.
And how has your kind of process kind of evolved over time, and how did it kind of become an organization? It's not just like you having a great time with some friends.
So I guess it started off as two of us just making a show together, and then that two of us, myself and Simon, who co-founded it. I thought of Hangman, he thought of Battleships. We made those shows. We brought on a producer, Katie, and for a long time we were just, we were a theatre company, but we weren't actually any legal entity, as a lot of, say, theatre companies might be in the UK. It doesn't necessarily have to be a legal entity. As long as you're an organisation by a name, then that's enough. It would have been maybe, I think it was 2 years ago, that I actually made it into a formal, like, limited company organisation, that sort of thing. And at that point, by that point, the other guys had moved on, and I'd been through a different process and then come back to it. And now it's an organisation. It's not, it's a company now. I get paid a bit. I've got an employee, and lots of freelancers and the community people who work with us. I think some of the main shift has really been about, it started off as a theatre and games company, but quite quickly people started saying, oh, we like what you're doing. Could you create something, a show or a tool or a game or a thing, in order to engage our audience with this idea? So an exhibition, for instance, or a community project about try to raise awareness about fly tipping and litter, or something about energy consumption, or the things, or a housing consultancy project, or a placemaking project, and they started to ask us to do that. So that's really the side of the things that has grown and kind of sort of filled us out, I guess. And that's the thing that we're really starting to do more and more of, and is the thing that I guess will make us survive, because sadly right now there ain't no performance, there's no street theatre, and there's nothing like that happening, whereas the other stuff is. So
right.
Yeah.
So why do you, like, I have my own ideas, but I would love for you to kind of talk about why you think play has such an impact, and then also, like, how as adults and this whole idea of engaging with people around you, whether you call them your neighbors, you think of them as community, right? You're kind of facilitating a process. Why is play so effective?
Well, so a lot of people say it better than me, but I'll try a bit, and I'll rob things from other people as we do. But essentially, it's about, well, we all played, right? Pretty much all played. And we all still do play, as adults, whatever, but certainly as children, we all played. So it's kind of coming from a place of a known experience that we can all relate to, because we've got a known experience we can all relate to, and a way of being that we can all relate to, even if we've really pushed that away, then it's still there somewhere within us. That creates a common ground. And when we all come together, that creates quite a democratic space where we can all connect and see each other. And when we're playing something, we're playing in a game, or we're playing at something, or we're engaged in something. I mean, I use the term active engagement a lot, particularly with this kind of stuff, which is much more about trying to engage wider people in civic participation, which is kind of really what the work is all about now. It's about trying to make sure that those people who are getting left out aren't getting left out, and we bring more people into the conversation. It's about actively engaging people in conversations using play in that way. So play just it shakes your shoulders down, maybe, I mean plays not all, plays all sorts of different things, but to do something playful, to use comedy, to use theatre, to use satire, to use nice colors, interesting things, to use surprising, to be curious, to create something that's unexpected and connects you with other people, so you see each other. I think that's the main thing. It's about allowing people to see each other and
Mhm.
release themselves and forget about maybe some of their agendas and just connect into a conversation together. I think
Mhm.
all of those things bring them on to create something that becomes a more democratic platform where these conversations can happen. I guess that's the sort of thinking really behind it.
Mhm.
There's a really lovely quote, and I think you saw the talk I did recently for PM Studio, but I'll
Yeah.
just read it because it's beautiful. And it's I keep holding these sort of things up. This is Brian Sutton Smith, who was there you go,
Oh,
Play
yeah.
for
There
Life.
we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Who was, and I think he wrote this when he was at Philadelphia. Actually, he's a Kiwi. Where is it? I came to realize play is not just fun, not just pleasurable for its own sake. Play's positive pleasure typically transfers to our feelings about the rest of our everyday existence and makes it possible to live more fully in the world, no matter how boring or painful or even dangerous ordinary reality might seem. It appears to me that in this way, play genetically refreshes or fructifies our other more general being.
Mm.
I mean,
Wow.
that's just really sang out to me, because of now, because we play is so prominent right now in everything we're doing, and how desperately we all need it and are needing to do it, and that's the way we're expressing ourselves. But also just how that's kind of what a lot of the conversations I have, a lot of the things I think about really is that play is what I tend to talk about is the fact that we're all kind of doing play, and everybody does play in their own way. So some people might be like, oh, I'm a grown up, I don't play anymore, plays for kids, whatever. but they're always playing, and whether that version of that person's play is playing pool with somebody, or playing a sport, or darts, or soccer, or whatever, or whether they are just down having a drink with somebody, or whether they're out hiking or exploring or going to a museum or tossing coins in the air or whatever. I mean, I think banter, I don't know if you use that word in the States much, banter. Do you use that?
Yep.
Yeah. So that, telling a joke, just that banter is that's everybody does that all the time, and that is just such a lovely expression of play. It's just a little bit of wordplay between people that happens a million times a second all the time. And for me, what I like to talk about is it's about identifying the play that we do. It's about recognizing that play and saying this is play, saying play is really good for you. Most of us know that play is good for your well-being. It's good for you. Yeah. You're already doing it. Look for the moments that you're doing it, cherish that, celebrate it, value it. And therefore, when you do that, you kind of end up you start to notice, it's quite, meditative, it's like mindfulness and that sort of way. You then notice more and more the play that you're doing, and you go, oh, the way that I was walking to work that day, and I actually, instead of going straight from A to B, I took a little detour down here, and I stopped for a moment to look at something strange, and then I had a laugh with something, and then maybe the next day, instead of just taking a little detour, maybe you just hop when nobody's looking or something. You start to just kind of bring more play into your life because you know that it's good for you, and there's a circular thing happening there. So yeah, it's sort of up on a
So there are a
tangent.
couple of questions that are popping up. So one, do you have, so this is from Leauge, do you have photos that you can share? So I can, on your website, there are lots of images of you at Mufti Games playing.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll put that in our little section.
Put the link in there. Yeah.
Yes.
We could do screen sharing, but I think with these things, it gets pretty clunky if we start jumping in and out of that sort of stuff.
I'll be like, yes. Yeah. So, so I will definitely post a link, and then Rebecca, who you've actually talked to, and I actually would love for you to like say like a little moment, but she would like to know what has been the most effective tools in your toolkit for engaging the curiosity required to engage someone in play and an improvisational way.
Oh, that's a long question. Okay. I would say, well, toolkit wise, I guess the things that we always consider are permission to play. So one's own permission. Am I going to give myself permission to play? Do I have the permission, or am I allowing myself to have the permission of the people who I am with in this space, particularly when this is outdoors, right? Or maybe on the street or something or whatever. So my peers, my family, the people with me, do I have their permission to play, or am I allowing myself to play in front of them? And then there's the permission of the wider public as well. It's whoever else is there as well. You know, do I feel those permission? There's a lot around busking and street theatre and things are happening on the street. You know, is it authority wise, are we allowed to play in that street? You know, because sometimes that brings up all kinds of questions about kind of, you know, civic participation. So there's that. Then there's the barriers. There's always as I said, that thing about when we did Hangman and we went, oh, hang on, all these people are really involved in this. We've just overcome loads of barriers. The whole pursuit through this practice that started really then and has kind of gone on now. My life's practice is really now is about overcoming obstacles and barriers and going, okay, well, what group are not going to engage with this, and why are they not engaging, and what can we do in order to make this accessible and do that, and not in a way not everything is always going to be accessible, but it's kind of it becomes a process of identifying barriers and then looking at ways to overcome them. I'd say, like, physically, the toolkit thing is like what we do is we use bait, really, like in almost all of our things. We use bait. So like there was a project we did, and it was for a community housing forum, and it was in South Bristol, and there used to be an airfield there, and they're building like 2,000 houses, I think it is. And the neighborhood forum had put out loads and loads of paper questionnaires, like 700 of them or something like that, or 7,000, something like that. And they've got a couple of, a few hundred answers. I think it was 7,000 questionnaires and they got about 200 answers. And they weren't really getting anywhere. And I started talking to them, and I was doing a project just beginning to look at inclusion around housing consultation. And so what we did was we built a big aeroplane. So we built a big aeroplane on wheels with AstroTurf wings and chalkboards and big green propeller. And I worked with a designer called Kerry Russell, who's fantastic and just got a lovely playful nature about her. And it was pretty, DIY. It looked chunky, it looks a bit like something out of the, what's that thing with Muttley, Wacky Races,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, almost
I
looked
know
like
what you're talking
about that. Yeah. Chase the Pigeon, And so we then just took that to, there's a car boot sale there, flea market. That the same term you use? Yeah. Flea market. Yeah. So that happens every week. So we just turned up with this aeroplane and stood in the middle of this car boot sale, and then stood outside the supermarket and stood outside outside the leisure centre there. And then people would come up and they would go, "What are you doing? What's this here for?" It's pretty big, this plane, and what's all this? And then we'd be like, oh, did you know that there are such and such houses getting built here? What do you think about it? And then once we got them talking, we could say, okay, come over here. Here's some models, here's some conversation. Let's have a conversation about this. And we were just able to bring in far, far more people. So it was just a nice bait. And since then, we've kind of always used that technique. So it's about using something weird, curious, and attractive, or not say attractive, something strange and curious. Another one we did was we did a project looking at well-being and about it was about well-being provision in different parts of Bristol, and the university was trying to look at where the gaps were. So we just created this really nice little table that could fit in the back of a small car that popped out, but in the middle of it was a glass jar. I'm just going to turn a light on. Hang on.
Okay.
And
by the way, thank you for coming on at 8 o'clock at night your time. So we appreciate that.
It's nice. This is my time now. Kids are asleep. It's great. So there was this glass jar, and then inside it we got a 3D printed brain. So we got this guy to print this brain, and it turned out really small, but it was like this brain about this big. And then we had a little game connected to it. So there was magnets, and you linked up the 5 ways to well-being. Do you have the 5 ways to well-being? You have that, the 5 things? So it's probably it was like a health or government thing. It's like, I can't remember what they all are, you know, stay active, stay connected, keep learning, those sort of things,
Okay.
in order to be good for well-being. So you had those things, and then once you connected them all up to the right place, the brain lit up. Really simple. But you know, we were going to, like, you know, we were standing on like a street corner in like a sort of quite poor area of Bristol, you know, where there was just like a couple of, I suppose like the equivalent would be a sort of rundown strip mall, right? And we're just sort of standing outside there with this table, with this little brain in the middle of it, just waiting for people, you know. And so then people would then come up and go, "What's that? What's that?" And then you could get them to play the game, and then you could go, "Hey, now we're talking. What kind of things do you do for fun? What kind of things do you do for health? Do you join groups? What things happen around here?" And we used a lot of play in that, actually. There was a whole thing about mapping within that. They were talking about mapping, and we started to look at trying to print out for each ward, each area we're in, some kind of like exact map of the area we're in. And then we realized that actually that wasn't very helpful. So we just did a really rough shape of an area of a city, but then got people to use building blocks and flags and plasticine in order to create their own maps. And it wasn't about scale. It was much more about the conversation you have with someone when you're sitting down. You're like, "Oh, do you know where such and such a place is?" Oh,
Right.
and then you know, you put the glass here and the cup and the bottle of ketchup, and you're like, and this is, and it became that. And that was much more helpful, because when people were doing that, they were able to go, "Well, here's the church where this happens, and here's the mosque where that happens, and here's the community center where that happens. And didn't that used to be there? No, that's gone now." I say, "Oh God, that was used to, oh, right. Okay, so that's out of the way. Well, this was here." And so you got to understand much more of a human point of view of what was there and what was missing. So then as we could add that up, we could say, well, these things aren't in place anymore, and these were, and this isn't, and why isn't that there? And it became a different kind of measuring of those kind of geographical gaps, really, I guess. Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting, I think, is that you are talking about this idea of like going to places where people are versus expecting people to come to you, right? So like the supermarket becomes a space, the rundown strip mall becomes a space for like social engagement and connect play. And, you know, as a way of kind of bringing down, like giving permission or even asking permission for people to engage.
That's it, yeah.
And that's really kind of super important and really interesting.
That's interesting, that asking, because that always becomes something, doesn't it? And it's partly because it's 100% because we're coming from street theatre. So that's kind of like when we're now starting to work with big kind of placemaking, more sort of bigger organizations, and starting to work with them as we're starting to do now. That's kind of what the narrative is that we're coming from street theatre. So it's all about understanding, if you can get a bunch of people to come and put on a pair of sheep ears and get chased around a bunch of obstacles and put into a sheep pen, then you can probably get them to have a better conversation about what kind of amenities this housing estate's going to need.
Okay, but what I need to know what information you were getting to get people put on sheep ears and like run into a pen. Like, what was the outcome other than a really good time?
Oh, that was that's a street game called One Kid and Their Dog. So that's like a sheep herding street game. So that's a game that we play, and it's like the oldest ever television show in the UK called One Man and His Dog, and it's just a TV show about sheepdog training. It's been on since like 1965. So we made a street theatre version of it. So you've got an actor that's a dog. You've got an actor that's, and that actor has always been a deaf actor we've worked with. We've got an actor who's a shepherd, and we've got an actor who's a sheep. And then what you do is you then you can have a look at it. It's a nice little trailer on our website. You can then basically we create an area using street furniture, but we kind of create an area in the city, and then we invite people in, and then it's a kind of playable story where a shepherd looks to recruit some new shepherds in order to train his dog, and then because there's no sheep there, you have to get sheep from the crowd, so people become sheep. But it's all done, it's all non-verbal. It's basically the whole thing's done silently.
Oh, wow.
There's a commentator, so who speaks over the top of it and sort of commentates on what's happening. But the whole invitation, everything is done non-verbally. And actually, it's the same with Hangman. There's something about, that's from the theatrical perspective, that's something about, you're just using visual invitation, you know, and smiling and playing with people and asking them props and whatnot. I mean, the commentator was important from, sort of jump back into theatre now, and the commentator was important from the point of view of, because we wanted to make it a show that would, it was visual, we wanted to make it a show that would really work for deaf audiences. So we worked with an access consultant and brought in deaf actors in order to be able to do that. But we were always then left with, well, that's great, but then what about anybody who's visually impaired? So we then brought in the commentator and worked with a visually impaired theatre maker to get that tone and that information right. But by doing that, it meant for people who could see and hear that you kind of get this even fuller, richer experience where sort of these two things are going on at once. Sort of jumped over to that. But yeah,
that's really
but it's about that invitation, you know, I mean, that's it. It's permission to play, it's the invitation. That's the bait. It's about, for me, it's always about the invitation, you know, get that invitation right. And that invitation, like you were saying, the invitation, you're being invited in. So then it becomes about, am I allowed to be here? Do I have a right to be here? How do I place myself here? And that's partly the reason for using play, is that it breaks down a bit of boundaries. It's, you know, I mean, in general, you know, but that's also about the work that happens beforehand as well, because, you know, particularly when you're working in that, you know, as you'll know, you know, working in that sort of thing, it's, you need to build those relationships. If you just turn up like, hey, here I am, I'm just doing this thing, then it can be really, you know, it can be really treading on people's toes. You know, it can be really annoying. We've had those experiences. We've got it wrong like that, where we've done something and gone in and in this sort of like slightly wacky, playful or something or other nature. And, you know, it's just felt really bad because we didn't have the permission of those people. And it felt like we were offending those people by being in that space because we hadn't built a connection first. So I think it's now, I'm going to sneeze.
Bless you.
Excuse me. To America. And beyond. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We've made those mistakes before, you know, and it's learning from that. And it's about, but again, I guess that goes back to using play in those ways early on. And I do find sometimes that just having something small and light that is curious and interesting that you can just sit with and people can come to you. It's again, it's the theatre thing. It's like bad theatre is theatre that's shy, you know, is sticking out to the stage. You know, on a stage, you want people to, you know, the aim is to bring people into you, you know, and it's the same with this, you know, it's you do something quietly that people can come to you and then
right.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about it, but yeah.
So we have another question. So first, Rebecca, thank you for posting the link.
That's great.
Here's another question. In your experience, when it comes to play, this is Rebecca question, which perceived persona has been more successful in engaging folks in play? Professional, the amateur, and this is like a personal question for her because she kind of goes back and forth with that. So like, is there a persona that you use? Like, is there one that is more kind of welcoming? And is there a distinction between the professional and the amateur in the way that you see people engage with you?
I'm not fully clear on the question. Is this
So I think it, and Rebecca, if you can clarify, but I think it relates to this idea of how people connect with you. So if in coming in as a staunch professional or an academic, there may be perceptions that either connect people to you or disconnect them from you, versus an amateur where people may, in the worst case scenario, have pity and engage, and in the best case, kind of see you as possibly one of them or someone who's figuring it out a little bit. And because of that openness, they give you more grace. Do you find there's a difference?
I haven't really found that. I mean, I think it's been about openness. I haven't with any of these that I've done, or you know, we've had our, you know, people who work with us going out to be the people on the street or wherever we are. It's just about being people who can listen, I think, being people who can communicate and being people who can talk, because it's not really, it's never about the actor or the facilitator. Obviously it's about the individual, it's about the community member or the resident there that this is about. So it's been about being able to be open and listen to them. Yeah, I mean that's kind of been it. I mean, maybe if they're asking where we're coming from, I would say some of the things with housing and stuff, if it's been that where it's coming from, it's about trying to find a different ground. So we are such and such, and we're here to find out this information on behalf of ourselves or whatever. I think there's something about placing that depending on who you are, because sometimes it can be, you know, people can have beef with a particular person or a particular organization or whatever, and it's, I mean, if they've got that beef with us as an organization, that's one thing, but that's not usually what's going on, you know. So it's kind of about making it quite clear who you are and what you're coming from and what you're trying to find out on behalf of, you know. Yeah. Right. Does that answer it? I don't know if that does.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think it does, because it highlights the thing that makes the connection, right? It's not necessarily about persona, it's about dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, what we're never doing is going in with clipboards or with iPads, you know. We're never there kind of going, oh, can you just answer, you know, can you just, you know, I've just got a list of 10 questions for you. It's never about that. It's about having, I mean, that's exactly what we're not doing. I've got this joke company name, which is We Hate Questionnaires. And like, we're just never, ever going in and asking those questions. We invite those questions into conversation and all the rest of it, and inviting loads of different access points to get people in. So I think it's maybe kind of partly about that. And we're not coming in as, you know, as academics or as council members or as we're individuals. I mean, maybe that's partly about, I mean, I generally work, because again, coming from theatre, we're generally working with performers. I mean, there was a whole housing thing that we did, which I think probably Rebecca might have seen, which was called Ferguson's Gang originally, Ferguson's Gang and the Octopus. And that was basically a fake housing agency. And we created these horrific development design boards where we would turn kind of beautiful heritage spaces into really horrific, like castles and things, into like retail centers, and like, you know, like really awful retail centers, or, you know, like beautiful kind of hills into these luxury, really disgusting luxury apartments with like Uber helicopters delivering stuff. And they were all about provocations. And then the characters that would be there to facilitate it there were very, very light touch. So they were there, it was satirical. So they were there just coaxing out a conversation, you know, and they were just very serious about what they were doing. And as far as they were concerned, this was a great opportunity and what they were doing was playing a really bad developer, let's say, you know, what they were doing was playing the worst, and the image was the worst. And the reason for that was in order to go, well, that coaxes out, of course, what we should be doing and what's bad about that. And sometimes, of course, you get people who come along who don't get it and then are absolutely agreeing with that person, and you're going, oh my God, you are me. But most of the time or sometimes people going, well, that's you know, that's really awful, and they might get upset about that, in which case you tone it back, you know, it's role play, you know, so you're toning it back and you're going, and either you're dropping hints to go, I'm joking, and become more and more ridiculous, like I'm not real, or you're actually dropping out of it and going, look, this is the show, it's part of this, the reason we're doing it is for this. So there's a lot of sensitivity there, and I'm always working with people where there is that sensitivity. I think that's yeah.
So let's see. So we have just a couple more minutes, and we are on a time delay. So if anyone has a question, go ahead and type it in now while I ask. Rebecca said the yes men conundrum. Yes.
Yes men. We watched that in the R&D a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll do that.
So again, if there are other questions, go ahead and put them into the chat and I'll read them. Otherwise, Malcolm, I have one more kind of official question for you. For people that are doing this work, right, whether they've been doing it for a long time or new to it, what is your kind of recommendation in this moment as we're kind of encouraged to social distance, and people in honesty are becoming a little paranoid of other people? How do you encourage specifically creatives, and those who work with community? How do you encourage them to keep doing this work? Do you have like strategies for like maintaining connection and still using play? Because I know that you actually did something recently.
I've been doing a few bits, and I guess what I can just share is some of the thinking I've been having and some of the things we've been doing. So, like for me, one of the best games or the best play things that I always love the most is just waving at people. And just it's like when you're on a boat, whenever you're on a boat and everybody waves, just that moment for me is always like the most beautiful moment. And it's those things that happen. And I think it's going back to that thing I talked about with observing the play that is happening and looking for those moments. So the way that when people are wearing face masks, the way that you can always still see people's eyes, and then the different smiles that you have, the way I've called it this 2-meter tango, the way that we step around each other and we're really quite graceful and we kind of bow in a sort of respectful martial arts kind of way, the way that we sort of, all these the rituals and the ceremony that we've got, I think it's about, that's the things that I'm noticing. They're the things that I think are really, I'm seeing the play in all those things. I'm seeing the play in the way that you look out the window, in the street thing that we talked earlier, in the way that as I'm sitting looking out going, I really want to play battleships with that person over there. And I think that that's leading also into the way that we play online. So we did a thing last week, which was we've got a set of Roman games that we play. One of the most fun or the most unique weird part of that playscape is we have a mini Colosseum where kids get dressed as gladiators and play rock, paper, scissors to the death. And it's just a piece of rope on the ground, and there's a sign that says Colosseum, looks a bit like a crucifix. And there's some costumes, and we have drums and we have percussive instruments, and people come up and we play a whole thing through the history of the Colosseum and what it is and where it was. And then we get people to be wild animals, and then we get them to create the ceremony and always get them to drum loads and then go silent, and we create the drama, and then they get dressed up as gladiators and they do staring contests and thumb wars and rock, paper, scissors to the death. So because we had one of those gigs booked, I guess it was last week, so it was booked months and months ago. And the way that in the UK we have the Arts Council, thank you Arts Council, who, so a lot of our art is funded, and they fund certain organizations on a 3-year basis. So those organizations who are already funded, NPOs, they're called, National Portfolio, were encouraged that if they had already booked gigs, then they would still find a way to pay those artists. And so this organization said to us, look, you're still paid, we'll still pay the fee, so if you can do something digitally. So we just took that idea and just played it in Zoom, essentially. So it was just an invitation. So we just invited kids to come along and play. They had to book in advance, and they got an email in advance saying, come and play in the Cyber Colosseum. If you can create some kind of Roman costume, it can just be a bike helmet and a towel, and think of a Roman name. That's all you need to do. And it was really sweet. It was really small. We had like 6 families all together. They all had their different little Roman names. They had, there was kids from like, just literally, with like a saucepan on their heads, to then other kids who'd like really gone all out and were called like Aurelius Metaphor or whatever, and were really like full on, like knew everything. And for like an hour and a half, we just played games with a Roman theme. So we played, instead of Simon Says, we played Caesar Says, and we played rock, paper, scissors, and we did staring contests, and we played a game where you had to draw an animal that was made based on 2 other animals and tell us why it was really horrific. And then other people played at home, and and it was shonky and weird and difficult, but it was just really lovely. And all those, you know, those people were there, they were part of it, they stayed, they played together, they played with each other. We made it like the 2 screens like we might be now, so we were able to play rock paper scissors against each other and do staring contests, and we could pop out into 6. And for me, that's kind of about, I realized really then that it's not necessarily having to be so much about technology. It's more about just another space that we play in, and just the way that we play in these spaces is just about how we play in limited spaces, really. So I think it's a bit garbling, but that's kind of where I'm sort of thinking of a lot at the moment, is about how we kind of play in these spaces. And if we're in these spaces, how we can, it's things like I was showing you before, like, you know, if you've got I just discovered that earlier, that if you've got your phone on Zoom at the same time as you're on Zoom, and then you can put it up to the screen, then you can end up with one of those mirror things where it just goes back to the end of time. And it's just, there's, yeah, sorts of things like that. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of movement here about trying to think about how we're connecting outside of it and how we're connecting on the street. And there was I'll finish off with, there was a lovely thing, and it actually relates back to how I found out about you and how this all came to be, which was that there was a workshop ran by a woman called Gabby Lind, who runs the, or is part of, founded the Cologne chapter of Loki, I think. And she ran a workshop all about the league in Leeds in England. And she posed a question, how could Leeds be more playful? And we all went outside and we looked around, and we found a whole load of signs everywhere saying no skateboarding, no drinking, no selling things, no marketing, no this, no that. So we created a set of play laws, and that was don't walk on the cracks because there might be alligators, and do make sure you high five a stranger, and you know, turn 3 times on this. And we just created a whole load of invitations. And that, if you put in hashtag on Instagram or Twitter, one plaything, the words one plaything, you get loads of things, and they're just like play invitations. So they're just simple chalk based play invitations. And there's something about that just now, because if you can leave invitations on the street or wherever they are for people, you might not ever see them actually interact with that thing, but it might be that they do. Then we're all interacting with each other at different times, but in the same space. And there's something I think quite beautiful about leaving messages and leaving invitations for people to play, and something about you being able to leave something down the street, which is just, you know, draw a bit of a picture here, and then you can go back to that and draw a bit more, and somebody else can come to that. And yeah, that's a thought I'm having. I'll go quiet.
So a couple of people raised that there's a similar, I think it's a more formal, similar but more formal project called Can Do Signs here in Charlotte, that is like a semi-permanent play with the definition sign project. So they look like city signs. But like, it's like jump up and down at the street light.
Yeah, sweet.
Like smile here, or whatever it is. And so and it's interesting to see people interact in that way, right? Because it's facilitated, but not, and it's uniquely theirs the way they choose to define it. And it does change the dynamic and the relationship between space and the city and people. So I love that you kind of raise that idea, and the idea that even in this particular project that you talk about, that it doesn't have to be formal, right? It was like chalk on the ground and just like have at it. So there's like this like randomness, and there's this lack of permission that also is exciting. I like,
it's slightly disruptive, slightly rebellious. We did it as well with them. I made that with a woman called Lynn, and she did a whole load of them with stickers that she stuck around, and like little envelopes as well that we kind of put around. You know, there's lots of different ways to do it, but it's just a little invitation to play. You know, and it's about that permission. In fact, I'll share a link with you. But maybe I'll find it in a minute. But it's on our website, on our blog. We made a Twine thing, which is like a kind of choose your own adventure program about one play thing, and we made it for a conference, and you can just go through that, and what would you do, and you're at work and you find this invitation, and where do you go, and what happens as a result of it. I'll send that over to you. I think that's a nice, I think that's the kind of key to it.
And Quinn actually asked, and I think some of this relates to it, any ideas for engaging marginalized communities amidst COVID that are also affected by the digital divide? And so seemingly like some of that leaving things behind that don't require physical facilitation might be one of the solutions. What other, do you have like another solution or thoughts about it?
The thoughts that I'm having around that are about, and it's again going back to some of that street theatre thing, it's about like Walkabout. So one version of street theatre is Walkabout, which is, you know, it might be like somebody walking about dressed as a dinosaur on stilts, right? You know, a carnival or something, and you kind of like, wow, that's quite spectacle. But I've just been kind of thinking a lot about how, so if you were standing in your front garden dressed as a dinosaur and you just had a sign saying text me an instruction and your phone number, you know, then that's a non-digital essentially kind of thing. I mean, even without the text me instruction, it's just that you're there dressed as a dinosaur. That's already kind of something. And there's something about what you can see, because I guess if you're completely locked in, and you've got neighbors there who are completely locked in, you can send them letters, you can drop things through their door, you can do things like that, you can put things on their window. But if they can see outside, then you've got a stage for them to be able to see and interact with, or not interact with, maybe just watch. But like it gives a platform and a place to be able to put something, and it might be like just a tree, you know, that's kind of out there that maybe slowly gets changed over a month. You know, maybe a tree or a stick gets turned into something day by day or hour by hour or something, you know, over a period of, there's something about scale and time and a shift, you know, that, and maybe changing that rhythm over time. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking a lot about this dinosaur in the front garden, you know.
Well, okay, so if you do the dinosaur in the front garden, we would like to see, please.
Yeah, sure.
So definitely include us. But we are just about out of time. Okay. So first, Malcolm, thank you for talking with us as a collective.
Pleasure.
It's, I think I think it's really important to have like these connections, like to know, for creatives to know that they're not alone, but then also to hear perspectives from people who are doing the work in other places, right? So part of what is important about the League is that we are like building these, like, it truly is like a league of creative people who work together that are like everywhere. And so it's wonderful to serve as a platform. Malcolm was supposed to come here, actually, what is it now, April? So like, next month, was it?
No, it was no, you were going to come to here next month.
Yes,
no,
I was going to
come over in August. So
yes,
it was August
and then
the 8th. I was going to come
in
over.
August. Yes.
But the
but
flights are on hold. They're all just open ticketed. RV booking is also open ticketed. So
that's perfect.
You know, so we'll see when it'll happen. It'll either be summer, maybe it'll be Easter, maybe it'll be, I don't know. I'll come over.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I'll definitely be there. I really want to come and hang out and stuff. And it'd be really good.
But like, please continue to like share. I'm going to share the links and also the titles that you talked about today, the books. So that everyone can look at them as a resource. And then Malcolm, you're invited too. We have a couple of like upcoming projects. So part of our attempt to really think about how do we continue to engage community, whether they're community members, creatives, whoever wants to kind of be a part of these conversations. So we move them online. And then, so we have a couple that are coming up, one on May 2nd at 11 a.m. with our fellow in Charlotte, who you unfortunately cannot meet right now, Alex Alcorn. She's doing an upcycle and reuse project conversation. So you can look on our website for that. And then we also have on the 6th and 7th, Brandon, who is another fellow, is going to begin a series talking about food sovereignty and how to have your own garden. And then we're actually going to have like a licensed therapist come on and like talk to all of us about our creative mental health, which I need because I'm having a couple of moments on occasion.
Yeah, I'm about it. Yeah.
So thank you all for being here. Quinn says she hopes to get to see you. She hopes that you still are able to come at some point.
Oh, I'm definitely coming over. Yeah. I mean, my wife will kill me if we don't get over there. You know. So we're all coming at some point. Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really, really nice to hang out. And like, if anyone wants to continue a conversation, feel free just to contact me through, just contact direct through the website, or through social media or whatever. But yeah, just you know, it'll be nice to connect with you all properly when I get over there. But in the meantime, just have conversations and just keep playing, you know, and just I think these things, you know, these group things, I think that's just, I'm just thinking there's these Zoom room, these things that are happening where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of opportunity there to play within them, you know. I think just look for the opportunities to play. That's amazing.
That'd be great.
Keep looking.
And if you have any like play sessions coming up, let us know.
I'm just thinking, I'm starting to try and look at that over the next kind of month or so. So yeah, I will. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.